So welcome everybody to the Rewriting the Sentence 2 Summit, a two-day program presented by the Center for Justice and Human Dignity and devoted to exploring the use of alternatives to incarceration in our criminal justice system. I'm Alan Vinegrad, a member of the board of the center, and along with Judge Bernice Donald, who you'll hear from in a moment, a co-chair of the summit. I'll be brief. I'm looking forward to a meaningful and insightful exploration of this subject over the next 2 days with a truly all-star team of experts and practitioners and others who are immersed in this field. Some of you are already well-versed in alternatives to incarceration programs, others not. Some, I suspect, are true believers in those programs. Others may not be, or not yet. But whichever group you fall in, we hope the program will be informative and enriching, and that you'll be inspired by it. Let me now turn to several of my colleagues for their opening remarks. I'll start by introducing first our host, Alan Morrison, the Lerner Family Associate Dean for Public Interest and Public Service Law at the GW Law School. Alan is a longtime public interest attorney, an accomplished Supreme Court advocate, law professor, and truly legendary member of the profession. That's just the highlights of his bio. The full version for him and all of our other speakers are in the program and available online. So with that, Dean Morrison.
Thank you very much. As Alan said, I am your landlord here today. Actually, all I did was answer a couple of phone calls and arrange to meet over here and found this space for you. I wish I could take some credit for this program as far as the substance is concerned, but I can't. With one exception, I did recruit Kate Weisberg, who's going to be on the second panel this morning. But other than that, all the credit has to go to Hannah, Eloise, and all the rest of the team. I also bring greetings from our Dean, Dana Bowen Matthew, who is unavoidably out of the country on a long-standing visit. If she were here, I think she would talk a few minutes about her interest in the law, which is the intersection of law and health. And I think what she would say is that part of the reason that people get into the criminal justice system is because of health problems that they have and how those amplify all the way from the beginning of their life right through the time that they first encounter the criminal justice system. And then she would also talk about the failings of the criminal justice system for people who are incarcerated, making situations worse because they don't have the health care that they need. But she's not here today, and so I'll just have a few words for you. As Alan said, I was a public interest lawyer doing mostly civil cases before I came here. And every time I would go to a conference, I have a rule for myself, which is, do I get an idea for a good lawsuit out of the conference? Otherwise, it's a failure on my part to do it. So unlike some conferences at academic institutions, this is not an academic conference. This is a conference of practitioners, people who are out doing things in the real world. The problems are enormous, and of course, there's no one solution because there's not just one problem. So the big question, of course, today is how do we improve, from a societal perspective, those who inevitably are encountered and caught up in the criminal justice system? And so your goal today should be, today and tomorrow, at least one good idea that you can implement in whatever part of the system you are working in to make the system less bad. You have many different roles, but focus on what you yourself can do. People used to ask me when I was practicing public interest law, what is your grand strategy and plan? I said I didn't have one. I was an incrementalist to try to make things a little less bad, to see if I can improve things a little bit from the way they are. And that ought to be your view today. You are here as people of action, and you want to take the actions both today and going forward that will make society a little better. to do no more harm than is being done already, to see if we can reduce recidivism and keep people from the worst encounters in the criminal justice system. So make connections with what you're doing today. Make connections with the people who are here. Sit back, relax, but don't relax too much. Be an active listener. And your challenge are to figure out which of these various solutions today can be part of your main life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean Morrison. Next, we'll hear from Summit co-chair Bernice Donald. Judge Donald served as a federal judge for over 35 years on the U.S. Bankruptcy Court and the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Tennessee, and on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. She was the first African-American woman in the history of the United States to serve as a bankruptcy judge. Before that, she was a state court judge in Tennessee, the first African-American woman in the history of the state of Tennessee to serve in that position. Yes, she is a trailblazer. She is extremely knowledgeable and passionate about the subject matter of this summit. In fact, she was the chair of the two prior summits that were produced by the Aleph Institute in 2016 and 2019. We're extremely fortunate to have her back a third time. And here she is, Judge Donald.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for being here for this Rewriting the Sentence Summit. I want to thank Aleph for its commitment to this great work. It is enduring work that requires the hands, hearts, and minds of all of us to get this right. And it is not something that we can just, snap our fingers and in an instant correct, make better. But as the dean said, incrementally, we can do this. And those things that we can do, we have an obligation to do. Why do I say that? Well, first of all, we know in this country, we have a tremendous prison problem. We have tremendous crime problems. We have tremendous problems of disparity and of poverty. We have incredible incidences of mental illness, and all of these things come together to, I think, fuel and inform the system that we have. I want to tell you that I have said in the past, and I believe today, that we must acknowledge this is not something that we can build our way out of. There are finite resources in this country, and to the extent that we apply those resources disproportionately to people on the back end for prisons, and I know there are wardens in here, but I say this still, to the extent that we apply them disproportionately to the act of building and warehousing, we limit what we can apply on the front end to children in elementary and preschools. We limit what we can do for people in brain development, because we know that what happens early on in children's lives will influence what happens at the back end and the course they take. Next, we have to recognize that we are a justice system. And what does that mean, a justice system? We have to take into account all of the parties, and not just the lawful parties, but we need to consider victims and prosecutors and defenders and judges and law enforcement officers, but we also need to consider probation officers and those who are in the parole system and people in the community, because this impacts them also. So what am I saying? All of us are stakeholders in this work, whether we have a title, a representative title or not. All of us are stakeholders. The final thing I want to say to you, the reason this is so important, we have to engage in the best practices that allow people who are broken and all of us are broken, but people who are severely broken at times, to be able to mend, to heal, and to be productive citizens in this world. And in that healing and mending process, no one should be required to sacrifice human dignity, human respect. No one should have to sacrifice their humanity on the altar of justice. That is not required. Our standard does not require that level of sacrifice. It does require accountability, it requires responsibility, but it does not require that ultimate sacrifice of humanity and dignity. And today we're going to be talking about, and tomorrow we're going to be talking about some of the ways that we who care deeply about justice for all, we who care deeply about equal justice, can come up with ideas and programs to make the system better. We have a problem when people in the system don't feel that they are treated equally. More than, and I know I said that was the last thing, but this really is. More than 60, 70 years ago, an organization called the National Conference of Christians and Jews did a survey on people's level of satisfaction and beliefs in whether or not they could get justice in our current justice system. Overwhelmingly, African Americans said, we don't believe we can get justice in the system, whether it's civil or criminal. Followed closely behind that were Latinx, then classified as Hispanics. Asian Americans had a little higher confidence, but they were also skeptical. Whites felt overwhelmingly that they could get justice in the justice system, whether it's civil or criminal. And in that study, Native Americans or American Indians were not included. Anytime any person anywhere in these United States believes that they can not get justice because of some kind of artificial characteristic of birth, we have a problem. And that's a problem that we have to address. Please join us in the great work of the Center for Justice and Human Dignity in rewriting the sentence and exploring alternatives. And then let us all band together and exemplify courage as we move forward, making this system the best that it can be. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Judge Donald. Next, let me introduce to you Rabbi Aaron Lipskar, the Executive Director of the Aleph Institute, a co-host of this year's summit, and the organization that basically gave birth to the Center for Justice and Human Dignity just over 2 years ago. Rabbi Lipskar has worked with the Aleph Institute for 28 years, first as a volunteer, then as an employee, and now as its executive director. Rabbi Lipskar.
Thank you, Alan. Good morning, everybody. So welcome. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I want to, of course, begin by giving some words of thanks, of course, to our host, or as he referred to himself as our landlord, Dean Morrison. And in Jewish tradition, there is a saying that says, everything that your host tells you to do, you have to obey, except if he tells you to leave. I want to thank Judge Donald, of course, for once again co-hosting this important summit, this important event. And to follow her remarks is challenging, as I think she encapsulated everything quite articulately that we hope to set out to accomplish in these next few days in these robust, important conversations. But just for a moment, I want to talk about the Aleph Institute and its founding over 40 years ago. And the catalyst and the mentor behind the founding of the Aleph Institute was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of blessed memory, a world leader and the world Jewish leader. And based on the Rebbe's essential love and belief that all people deserve dignity, forgiveness, and the opportunity to choose and be part of a productive and meaningful life that positively contributes to society. In fact, it was back in the 70s, and this is all recorded and this is all noted, that while there was a mass movement for mass incarceration in the United States, the Rebbe was speaking passionately and openly about the need for criminal justice reform and for changes to the system. So through Aleph's work over these many years, working directly in hundreds and hundreds of institutions on an annual basis with thousands and thousands of individuals, and of course addressing the critical needs that the family members of these individuals face in that crisis, and the many other aspects that are connected and the collateral damage to this, Aleph has spent the last many years focused on these reforms, on the importance of alternatives to incarceration. And through that, as you just heard from Alan, a few years ago was born this amazing institute, the Center for Justice and Human Dignity. And I must applaud the Center for Justice and Human Dignity, and I thank Chris, the executive director, is here today with his amazing team, Hannah and Rachel and Eloise, and everybody that has worked so hard, not just to put together this amazing summit and conference, where as we can see from the turnout, and I was told this morning that we have had over 500 people register to participate over today and tomorrow, which is really a testament to the commitment to this important conversation and hopefully to yield tremendous results. They have really worked tirelessly to further the important conversation, and I want to thank them very, very much. So on behalf of the Aleph Institute, I once again want to thank you all for being here. I want to welcome you all. We look forward to a successful summit, and if there's anything that Aleph can do for you in your offices or for any aspect of the work that you're doing, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to us, as we're there for you at any time. Have a good day.
Thank you, Rabbi Lipskar. Finally, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce Chris Poulos, the executive director of our host, the Center for Justice and Human Dignity. Chris, who's a lawyer, joined the center in February after serving in a number of different capacities in the criminal justice system, including as Director of Person-Centered Services for the Washington State Department of Corrections, the Executive Director of the Washington Statewide Reentry Council, and while a law student, he served at the White House in its Office of National Drug Control Policy. His story is an extraordinary and inspirational one, overcoming family tragedies, addiction, and federal incarceration, to becoming a much sought-after advocate and leader in the quest for criminal justice reform. Chris Poulos.
It's an incredible honor to be here with you all this morning. Thank you so much. I am the Executive Director of the Center for Justice and Human Dignity, as Alan mentioned, and our mission is to safely expand innovative and effective alternatives to incarceration while improving conditions for folks who are incarcerated, for family members, and also for correctional staff. I also wanted to echo the thank you to the Center for Justice and Human Dignity staff, as well as the Aleph Institute. This was amazing. We almost had a federal government shutdown, and we did not. And here we are. The room is packed. What an amazing opportunity we have here today. One of the big purposes of the summit is not just to get us all together today, but it is to explore expanding innovative and effective alternatives to incarceration throughout the entire country. So the center would like to offer to folks, community members, prosecutors, judges, probation, pretrial, all of those folks are here today. We're here to support your communities, your jurisdictions, if you are interested in expanding alternatives to incarceration. And I'd like to turn to my personal story. I was arrested for the first time at age 15 for possession of cannabis and taken to adult jail. I was ultimately released to the custody of my single mother when I was 15 years old. And what I remember every time I was arrested, every time I was brought to court, and I was in and out of the criminal legal system for the next 10 years, from age 15 right to 24, 25 years old, bouncing in and out. And I remember always being told what I couldn't do. Don't smoke pot. Don't drink alcohol. Don't stay out past 9 p.m. Don't associate with Bobby. Don't eat all of these things that I couldn't do. I wish someone in the system had told me what I could do. I wish one of these judges or prosecutors or even police officers had told me, Chris, you can do this. You can do that. I really, truly wish that. I wish I'd been connected with a credible messenger, a mentor, someone who had walked this path and emerged from the other side. Would I have listened? I don't know. But it would have planted a seed for the future, for possible change, possible growth to come. I want to close with two stories about two separate teachers, two educators that had a profound impact on my life. The first was my high school guidance counselor during high school in Portland, Maine, where I grew up. And I experienced incredible trauma as a teenager. My stepfather was a commercial fisherman. His boat was lost at sea. We believe it was run down by a tanker, and we didn't have the money or power to pursue any kind of investigation really into that. My grandfather died after a long battle with cancer after I held him as he left this earth in a very powerful experience. And one of my close friends was murdered, all during my senior year of high school. I found myself battling addiction. I found myself experiencing homelessness. And I once went to this guidance counselor and said, I want to go to the University of Southern Maine. You know, wasn't saying Harvard, Princeton, anything like that, just my public university. And she said, Chris, I don't really think a 4-year degree is really in the cards for your future. She discouraged me. We all have the power to harm or heal with our words and our actions. I want to share this opposite of this high school guidance counselor. I don't remember that high school guidance counselor's name. The opposite was Lieutenant Commander Deborah Duffett. She was the alternative credit option teacher at my high school, and there was a bunch of, I hate to use the word misfits, but kids that were at-risk youth. I think that's probably a better term to include myself in that. And funny, they kept us in the basement of the high school. Not even joking, our room was in the basement. So one day, Mrs. Duffett was like our shepherd. And she one day, I show up to school, I was literally beaten up from a car wreck and a fist fight, like all within a couple days. I showed up and I'm just having my head down and I was just looking for a place really to stay warm. I'd sit in the school. They never made me leave the school, thankfully. And Mrs. Duffett grabbed me by my shoulders like that and she said, Chris, you're going to be a lawyer someday. Imagine that. I show up beaten and bruised and she said, Chris, you're going to be a lawyer someday. She was with me through my trouble, my active substance use disorder. She was with me through my federal prison sentence. She was there the day I graduated college. She was there the day I graduated law school. She was the star witness in the testimony for me to be able to attain my law license when I was initially told you may not be able to because of your record. She was there through it all. Her prophecy came true. She spoke truth and power through her words into the future, and here I stand. Thank you. Thank you. Tragically, Mrs. Duffett died in a car wreck about 2 months ago. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about the impact that she had, not on my life, but on all these young folks' lives who never would have made it through high school without her. As you return to your courtrooms, your communities, your probation caseload, I ask you one thing. I ask you not to be that high school guidance counselor. I ask you to be Deb Duffett. Thank you.